Welcome to You Are From God, where we open the Bible and learn to see the image of God in ourselves and the people around us. I'm Scott Taylor.
And I'm Tyler Hall. Thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about seeing the soul. And as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, we are striving to understand the idea that you, listener, are from God, and that I, as one of the hosts of this podcast, and Scott as the other host, we are from God, and every single person that you're going to encounter in this world is from God. And so the idea that we all have a soul, we talked about this in the first and the second episode of this program. I encourage you to go back and listen to those if you haven't. But today we're kind of going to revisit that, especially from the idea of how we interact with other people. And Scott, we're going to use this as a way to kind of jump into a series of discussions over the next several episodes about how we can kind of take off our blinders and the things that keep us from seeing another person as a God-created, image-bearing soul. And so we're going to be in Luke 10 today. We're going to read the story of the Good Samaritan. We've alluded to this story several times. We're going to certainly come back to it as we talk about this topic, but it's just a powerful way in a story that Jesus tells to illustrate the idea that God's not this favor of persons. He doesn't show preference to one group of people over another. Everyone is made in his image. He desires all men everywhere to be saved. And we have to understand that if we're going to be God's people and to truly understand how we're made in his image. In Luke 10 and verse 29, Jesus has already answered the importance of loving your neighbor as yourself to this one who's standing up to test him. But in verse 29, this lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who's my neighbor?" And Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave it to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" And he said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." Just such a powerful story, Scott, and it would certainly strike the hearts of the people in Jesus' audience at that time and this day that we're reading about. It strikes us in our hearts when we seriously take the time to consider the lessons here, and it strikes our hearts in that way as well.
That's the struggle when you read these things, is that we can see ourselves in these if we're willing to look. Mm-hmm. And that's the danger sometimes. We have talked about being blind and justifying sin recently, and you think about this story, and some of this may be missed on us from the standpoint of him using the Samaritan, him using the Levite, him talking from a Jewish standpoint with the Samaritans and what that looks like. It's important for us to understand, though, this really comes down to how we're looking at other people, and it's important to learn this from our God. To your point, you brought up the neighbors and the attitude that we need to have towards one another. Well, it's interesting in verse 31 to me that obviously the man is beaten and he's left, and depending on your version that you have may say by chance or coincidence is the word that Jesus uses. And I love that because what it looks like to me is that you're not prepared for these opportunities. There's opportunities that are around us and we're just not paying attention to them, or we stumble across something that we've had the opportunity to see, but we just kind of have our blinders on, and sometimes we miss it. And to the circumstances of the priest here in verse 31, where it talks about he saw him, and instead of doing anything else, they all have this moment of seeing him. His reaction is, I need to go to the other side. Now, Tyler, to me, what this brings up is that he would have struggled with, if he touches him, there would have been unclean. There's some reason that I'm not going to do this. I need to continue on. Jesus doesn't give the points as to why.
He's got important work to do.
That's right. And we all can understand that. I'm busy. We have time. And there's a situation. I don't know this person. I don't know what's going on. He obviously was left half dead. I don't want to get involved with this. And we got to be careful about it. So instead of seeing obstacles, it's seeing the opportunities that are before us that we need to make sure that we're looking at. So he passes by. Now you have this Levite. And it makes it clear that he sees him. He sees this person. And what does he do? He does the same thing. He passes on the other side. Too busy. Afraid of being unclean. Whatever the reason is, His justification was, I can't stop. I am not going to stop. What if this happens to me? All the different things that may play into their minds. And now you come to the Samaritan. The Samaritan and Jews did not get along. That certainly is a part of this conversation. So for the lawyer to end up saying, well, I guess it's the Samaritan that did the right thing, would have been an interesting thing to hear. But it's the Samaritan who saw him. And Tyler, here's the key. He felt compassion. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. They all saw the person that was in need. The others justified or rationalized their reasoning for not stopping. They justified the what may have happened. Maybe the man deserved it. Whatever the end result of a thinking situation that you can come up with, because that's what we do. Oh, he deserves to be in that situation. I'm not going to help him. Whatever the case may be, I'm too busy, whatever it is. Well, the reality is, as the Samaritan did, we just need to have compassion. There are people in bad situations. We may not even know, obviously, why. They don't look the part as we would like them to be. And we make a judgment call on somebody's soul rather than just having compassion on people and shining our light and doing that kind of attitude or having that kind of attitude that we need to have. And Tyler, this is talked about throughout the scriptures.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And obviously Jesus used the illustration here to point to it, but you talk about having the understanding that we are to see each other the way God sees us and to look past whatever circumstances. To your point, I love that in each of these examples, all three men saw this man, but that's the key. They're not seeing his soul. You know, the priest and the Levite, they see the circumstances. They see the threat of maybe the person or the people who did this are still around, and if I go help, they're going to jump on me. Maybe they see this is going to take a lot of time, or they see what impact, what cost is it going to be of me to actually stop and do something about this, any of those things. The Samaritan is actually the one who looks at this, and arguably, he has more to look past. This is somebody who's opposed against me. This is somebody that, just by the nature of where I'm from and where he's from, we would not get along. And so there's this idea of looking past those circumstances, past the circumstance that this is the same difficulties of this is a hurt man, I don't know what's happening, I only have part of the picture of what I've stumbled upon this scene. So it's those same things that the priest and the Levite have to look past, but to your point, it's the fact that he looks past it and has this compassion. He's not seeing a difficulty or seeing a threat. He's seeing this is somebody who is hurt, and if I was in this situation, what would I want to be done for me? And obviously we're projecting there a bit, but that's the idea of compassion. It's I feel what this person must be going through right now.
And I think that's such an important point. When we talk about compassion, it's not just simply, oh, that's sad. I feel sad for that person.
I feel sorry for them.
What happens here is he has action. There's action to that compassion. And this is the word that Jesus has for us, this compassion piece that is so important. But it wasn't just, oh, that's sad. You know, he did something. Mm-hmm. He died for us, and in times where he'll use it in the scriptures, he healed somebody or brought somebody back from the dead when he talks about the compassion that he has. And that's important for us as well. It's one thing to feel something. It's another thing to allow that feeling to become action. And that's really what we see with the Samaritan.
You know, even that point, Jesus could have used this illustration and put anybody as the third person here. He could have used a woman. He could have used a Gentile. He could have gone anywhere. He in particular chooses to make this third person a Samaritan. And to your point, with the lawyer having to answer his question at the end of this parable, he doesn't say the Samaritan. Right. In verse 37, he says the one who showed him mercy. To your point, you kind of say it through gritted teeth, but he's not even acknowledging his nationality. It's the Samaritan. No, it's the one who showed him mercy. Appreciating, yes, it's that action. It's what he did that's so impactful and powerful. It's the compassion in action. But that does not erase who this man was. He was a Samaritan. And there's a reason why Jesus chooses to make him a Samaritan in this story and retelling it, whether it was something that actually happened that God knew about, and so Jesus is retelling it as a parable, or whether it's simply to illustrate the point that no matter what these things are, the lawyer might have had this difficulty because he struggles with seeing the souls of Samaritans. You carry this to application today, Scott. When you talk about things like racism, it doesn't have to be straight out, I hate group of people X. It's, I guess these people who do this, no. God has made everyone in his image, regardless of what they look like. And to your point that you brought up earlier, the scriptures are rife with the idea that we have got to get past that because we are all made in the image of God and made the way we are to do so. You talk about the Jews and Gentiles coming together in Ephesians 2, that Jesus, what he does on the cross, tears down this wall of hostility. There's no more need for this dividing wall. I think about even situations like James 2. If you go to the book of James, there in those first 7 verses of the 2nd chapter, James is now talking not about circumstances that we'll get caught up in necessarily with the Good Samaritan and the one who was hurt among the robbers, but now we're getting into the point of what somebody looks like just from their clothing or material wealth. James will say, "My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory." That idea of partiality is really key, and we'll show partiality on different levels. Here in particular, James has something in mind. In verse 2, "For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing, and you say, 'You sit here in a good place,' while you say to the poor man, 'You stand over there,' or sit down at my feet, have you not then made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom which he has promised to those who love him? But you've dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich ones who oppress you and ones who drag you into court? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called?" And so the idea here that James is getting at is anybody can walk into the church assembly and you make judgment calls just based on what they look like. And you say, "Oh, this person must be important." Where they're, just because they look like they have it all together, mean they might be struggling or they might have ill will or intentions. And it's not our job to judge the heart. It's God who sees the heart. But this idea of we make judgment calls based on appearances, based on clothing or circumstances, whatever it might be. And to this point in the illustration that James gives, just because somebody doesn't look like they have affluence or a certain level that we deem acceptable wealth, that we disregard them and we fail to see the soul and fail to understand that that person has just as much value in the spiritual sense of being a soul made in the image of its maker. And so that's why you have all this conversation, what Jesus teaches, what the apostles and the other New Testament writers will teach, that we have got to take these blinders off and start seeing the souls around us and get these things that hinder us, that hold us back from doing that. And that takes work, and that takes humility, and that takes really being honest with ourselves and with God and asking for his help to look past those things.
You know, it's interesting for people that don't have a true knowledge of the scriptures. If you ask them which king looked the part, Saul or David, they would say Saul. Mm-hmm. Or they would say David, rather. But the answer was Saul. He's the one that looked the part. He was head and shoulders above everyone else. David wasn't even in the room when his brothers were brought in to see who was going to be anointed, and they had to go out and get him with the sheep. And you just think about it from that standpoint, and God's answer to that is, I look at the heart. Mm-hmm. I look at the heart. And that's really what we have to be striving to do. Now, to your point, we're not going to be able to see the heart itself, but it's seeing people for what they are. And I always think of 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, verse 16. It says, "Therefore, from now on we recognize no one by the flesh, even though we have known Christ by the flesh, yet now we know him in this way no longer." And I love this verse from the standpoint of seeing people as souls. Seeing people as souls and the difficulty that comes with that. We a lot of times look at people as the person that's in the seat next to me, or the person that's driving in the car next to me, or the person that's in front of me in a line. You know, it's an obstacle rather than that's a soul. That is somebody, as 1 Timothy 2 will talk about, that God wants to be saved. He wants to be have a relationship with that person. And I may have the opportunity to help them meet Jesus and have that relationship with them. But if I'm so busy looking at them as an obstacle rather than what they really are, we're going to miss the point. I always think about the blind man that Jesus healed. And the first time he asked him, what does he see? And he says, I see kind of trees. They look like trees. And the next, he continues to heal him to focus his eyes, and it says, well, I see the people now. And a lot of times that's what we do. I think we see trees instead of seeing the actual people. We need to see the souls. We need to understand that whatever the outside looks like, whatever they've done in their past, whatever the situation is, that we may try to find reasons not to talk to them, Jesus died for them. And they have every right and opportunity to hear the truth just like we did. And that's by the grace of God that he wants us to be with him, and he wants that person to be with him as well in heaven. And so we've got to make sure that when we shine our lights bright, that we're willing to shine it brightly for every single person, not just the ones that we deem to be righteous enough in order to hear the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about the idea of, what does somebody do to deserve my time or attention? That we wouldn't necessarily verbalize that or say that, but we can get caught in that way of thinking way too easily. And I don't know this person. Look, Jesus died for you when you were his enemy, is what the Bible will say. And so I have this awesome opportunity, and you, listener, have this awesome opportunity to look past circumstances, look past the material, economic, societal, whatever walls might be there. Jesus, a faith in God, is big enough and powerful enough and is meant to tear down any sort of wall of division. Our task now, and hopefully what we have begun in this conversation will continue in future episodes, is to help all of us take an honest look at how we see other people. Do I have the issue of the priest and the Levite where I might be just so busy doing what I'm doing and I get caught up in that, or I get so worried about what might happen to me, or the circumstances of, I have no dealings with that, what the Samaritan very well could have done. We don't get along. We're not supposed to be near each other. And instead, seeing people past all the smoke and the clutter and the issues to just seeing people as a soul that needs to be with its God, and truly appreciating that they and we are from God. Thanks for listening. Show your support by leaving a review on your podcast app, and share this episode with someone you want to encourage. If you have questions or would like to get in touch with us, go to youarefromgod.com. That's youarefromgod.com.